Nestled in the northwest Arkansas Ozark Mountains, Huntsville was a small, tight-knit rural town in the 90s. In contrast to bigger city areas, the town had a slower pace of life, close social ties, and a culture firmly anchored in its agricultural and historical traditions. During the 1990s, Huntsville's community life was characterized by a profound sense of harmony. Locals were frequently acquainted, and the town's social fabric was knitted by a variety of communal activities. Huntsville was the kind of a town where the residents looked forward to annual exhibitions, parades, and local festivals. These events gave residents a chance to socialize and cement their links to the community in addition to providing entertainment. The tragic incident of Sabrina Underwood took place in this remote setting. On January 20, 1991, Sabrina Underwood, then 19 years old, went missing after her mother dropped her off at the intersection of U.S. Highways 412 and 62 in Boone County, close to Bear Creek. Sabrina was traveling to Calico Rock to see her boyfriend, who was detained at the time. Sadly, Sabrina's mother never saw her daughter again. The disappearance of Sabrina struck shockwaves across the town. After months of tense anticipation following Sabrina's disappearance, a somber discovery startled the community on April 8, 1991. Near the Gum Spring Cemetery, northwest of Calico Rock, a hunter found bones of a human, hair, a pair of undies, and an earring. The bones were identified to be that of Sabrina Underwood, who met her tragic end far from the place she intended to visit. The cause of Sabrina's death was initially ruled as not known, thus launching a lengthy and heartbreaking investigation. Law enforcement agents put in a lot of overtime interviewing people, following up on leads, and trying to piece together the specifics of her case. Even with their best efforts, no one was taken into custody, and the case eventually went cold, leaving Huntsville with an unsolved mystery hanging over town. Over 3 decades would pass before the darkness was lifted. A crucial tip surfaced in July 2022, starting the investigation once more. A local attorney represented a client who was detained in an Arkansas state prison at the time. He had a confession letter that was both unexpected and unsettling. For the 2018 murder of his estranged wife Kirsty Headley, the client, Rick Allen Headley, was already serving a life term. The confession letter rekindled a long-dormant case by revealing gruesome details regarding Sabrina Underwood's tragic demise. Without any delay, Rick Allen Headley was interrogated by the investigators about the contents of the confession letter. The startling details he offered would throw light on the atrocious crime that had stayed hidden for over 3 decades. Headley confessed to the crime, and his account read like an ominous tale that had come to pass in the quiet town of Huntsville. The affidavit states that Headley's confession provided a bleak depiction of Sabrina's last moments. He stated that while at a gasoline station, Sabrina approached him and asked for a ride. What happened on that ride was going to haunt Headley for years to come. In an unexpected turn of events, Sabrina approached Headley and abruptly demanded cash, threatening to accuse Headley of abusing her if he refused. Headley described the events leading up to Sabrina's brutal death in a harrowing narration. Following their intercourse in his truck, Sabrina told him she would require a large payment from him, or else she would tell people that he had assaulted her. Headley was taken aback by this and feared that there would be problems. What had happened next was actually terrifying. Though Headley drove off and left Sabrina behind, he was troubled by the seriousness of the situation. He thought he could not allow her to destroy his life. This was the moment when he violently attacked her outside the truck. He pulled her into a nearby cemetery, out of sight from any onlookers, in a startling and gory act. The summary of the slaying itself is nothing but frightening. Headley admitted to severing Sabrina's neck with a Rambo-style knife that had a compass attached at the end. He went into graphic detail about how he hammered the knife blade with a rock until it snapped the bone and decapitated her. He said that his goal was to remove any possibility that Sabrina's body might ever reveal what had happened to her. After committing this heinous act, Headley hid Sabrina's body from sight by covering it with logs and bushes. Then he grabbed her belongings and placed them next to her body. The knife and rock employed in the gruesome act were tossed into a stretch of woods many miles distant. Headley took off his blood-stained clothes at his mountain home apartment, threw them in a garbage bag, and showered to rid himself of Sabrina's blood. The garbage bag with his blood-stained clothes was dumped in a trash container behind a shopping mall, following which Headley left the vicinity. Headley's admission not only stunned the whole town of Huntsville, but it also gave Sabrina's family, who had suffered through years of agony and doubt, some peace of mind. In the long-awaited pursuit of justice in the unsolved case of Sabrina Underwood, Rick Allen Headley's apprehension marks a crucial turning point. He is currently being charged in relation to Sabrina's case, and the community awaits his court appearance in Fulton County Circuit Court in late November 2023. The case is a sobering reminder of the resilient nature of small towns and the law enforcement's unwavering commitment, who will never give up on delivering justice to families like the Underwoods. Virginia Freeman, a 40-year-old married woman, mother, and a devoted real estate agent, was well known in the vibrant city of College Station, Texas, Virginia, for her upbeat demeanor and close connection within her neighborhood. Yet, on December 1, 1981, Virginia's life took a devastating turn, shattering the tranquility of this close-knit community. As Virginia was giving a tour of a vacant property in Brazos County to an interested client, her husband, Charles Freeman, was met with a startling discovery. When Virginia hadn't returned home from work, Charles became worried and subsequently discovered her body lying in the vacant property. Severe violence was evident from the crime scene, with indications of a stab wound to the neck and head trauma. Investigators later went on to characterize the crime as an act of brutality, highlighting the atrocities suffered by the gullible woman. Charles Freeman was the initial focus of the investigation, as is conventional in these sorts of cases. Nevertheless, a careful inspection ruled out any signs of marital problems, and Charles gave a strong alibi, excluding him from consideration as a suspect. Initial leads surfaced as a local brick mason claimed seeing a guy and a car close to the crime scene, leading forensic hypnosis to produce a composite sketch and an incomplete license plate. Sadly, no solid leads came from this direction. The case went cold for 2 years before a possible link to a different case surfaced. Henry Lee Lucas, who had previously been found guilty of a murder that occurred over 250 miles away in Ringgold, Texas, startled the court by claiming culpability for multiple other unsolved killings. A photo of Virginia was shown to Lucas by detectives expecting a breakthrough in the case, and he admitted to stabbing her in the neck. But when he was unable to pinpoint the location of the crime, it quickly became clear that Lucas was fabricating this confession in an effort to postpone his impending sentence. The case went nowhere before 1997, when developments in DNA technology offered a ray of optimism. The Texas Rangers Cold Case Task Force, working together with the Brazos County Sheriff's Department, resolved to reopen the cold case after finding DNA under Virginia's fingernails that indicated signs of struggle. Suspects had their DNA tested. Charles Freeman was among them. However, the results were inconsistent with the evidence discovered. Though there were some early challenges, investigators eventually centered on James Otto Earhart, a former appliance maintenance worker who had been found guilty of killing a 9-year-old girl less than 10 miles away, 6 years after Virginia was murdered. The difficulty was in gathering Earhart's DNA since he had passed away in 1999. In June 2018, following a painstaking process that involved genealogy records and aid from his son, the team managed to get approval for exhuming Earhart's body. A significant hurdle was the alarming condition in which Earhart's remains in a cardboard box were exposed to the environment conditions. However, a DNA sample from femur bone was successfully obtained and then tested. On August 30, 2019, the results were found to match with the DNA profile from Virginia's fingernail clippings. a long-standing mystery was solved when James Otto Earhart was identified as the culprit after his death. Although Charles Freeman passed away before he could see justice being served, his children found closure in the fact that their mother's case was solved. The detectives rejoiced at the conclusion of the case, which had plagued the community for almost 40 years, even if they regretted not being able to arrest Earhart. From a heinous murder to a posthumous conviction, the case demonstrated the perseverance of law enforcement and the growing significance of forensic technology in cracking cases that remain unsolved. On Friday, as the family and law enforcement officials gathered to mourn a lady whose homicide was finally solved, pink roses, similar to those Georgie Cannaday would pick along the dirt road near her rural J home, were placed on her gravestone. On June 28, 1973, the dead body of 48-year-old Georgie Cannaday was discovered wrapped up in an upstairs bedroom of her rural J house in Delaware County, Oklahoma. As per the recent autopsy report, her cause of death was strangulation. Following the re-interviews of previous as well as fresh witnesses, the Delaware County Cold Case Unit concluded Cannaday's case just recently. 2 males have been positively identified by investigators as Cannaday's murderers. Both of the suspects, however, have passed away. A few questions still remain unanswered, such as, what was the motivation behind her killing? According to Mark Wall, a Delaware County cold case detective, it definitely wasn't robbery. Near the body was discovered her purse, with cash and private documents in it. Wall claimed that one of the suspects, who was not old enough at the time, used strangling as his method of operation. The gathering of family members took place at the Xena Cemetery, a remote northeastern Oklahoman graveyard where Cannaday was buried 50 years prior next to her father, George Cannaday. They spoke about the woman they remembered as their kind aunt and shared stories of her. Jerry Dubois remarked after the funeral commemoration service, "She loved children, and she used to make the best peach cobbler." At the time of Georgie's death, Jerry was only a young woman. She was wed to Charles, who was George's nephew. Wanda Forster, George's niece, also shared her memories of her late aunt. She simply adored kids. She was a child herself in a sense. 3 months preceding her passing, Georgie was living by herself in the house that her dad had left her. Georgie was an introvert most of the time and hardly ever left the house. Before the funeral ceremony, Detective Wall, Cold Case Director Stephanie Bishop, and Delaware County Sheriff James Beck met with the family to address as much of their inquiries as they could regarding the case. The most important question in their minds was, who are the suspects? Despite the fact that the 2 suspects have passed away, investigators are presently not permitted to reveal their identities. Although Sheriff Beck acknowledges the family's distress about being unaware of the killers' identities, he asserted, "It's incredibly satisfying to finally know after 5 decades." Wall stated that, "Since we know who committed the crime and how it was committed, the family may finally feel somewhat at ease. Even though the people responsible have passed away, I hope that they are still paying for their crimes now that the case has been solved." Bishop, a volunteer on the cold case squad, also spoke with the family about the search for missing evidence in the case, including the rug used for covering Georgie's body. Before revealing the identities of both suspects, Bishop stated, "We may have the family's signed confidentiality releases. We will reconvene in a few months." The Cold Case Unit received appreciation by family members for their efforts. Detective Wall took Georgie's family to the old family house after the funeral so they could see the place where Cannaday drew her last breath. Georgie, the youngest member of the family and the center of everyone's affection, was named after her father, George Kennedy. Her favorite flower, pink roses, were placed on her gravestone as the family said their final goodbyes at the gravesite. On July 13, 2019, Paislee Shultis went missing from Cayuga Heights, close to Ithaca, New York, leaving her family devastated. police had a suspicion that the 4-year-old had been abducted by her birth parents, Kirk Shultis Jr. and Kimberly Cooper, who had lost her custody. Nevertheless, it would take them almost 3 years to prove it. On Monday, the child, who is currently 7 years old, was discovered alive and well in her biological father Saugerties' New York home. For a considerable amount of time, investigators had been under the impression that she was being held there since on earlier visits, Kirk Shultis Sr., Shultis Jr., and Cooper would only allow a restricted access to their house. On February 14th, police were able to gather sufficient evidence for a search warrant. They spent an hour searching through the place until a detective observed that the basement stairs were irregularly constructed. Paislee and Cooper were hiding in a tiny portion within, according to Joseph Sinagra, the chief of police of Saugerties. There seemed to be something unsettling about the staircase to him. They never heard a sound from the girl. Kimberly, too, remained completely silent. The question that needs to be addressed is what she had been told by her parents that would keep her so hushed up and calm, while the police are marching up and down and tearing apart the staircase. Paislee grew up in the tranquil village of Cayuga Heights, located outside of Ithaca prior to the kidnapping. She had only 4 brief years of normalcy in her life before Cooper and Shultis Jr. lost custody of her and her elder sister. Thereafter, according to our understanding, someone told the parents that the other daughter had been picked up by the legal guardian and by county officials at the time, and that led the parents then to take Paislee and run away, stated Sinagra. Throughout their years-long investigation, the authorities received multiple tips on the Saugerties residence and had suspicions about Cooper and Shultis Jr. from the very beginning. However, Sinagra claimed that every visit the police had ever made to the family was greeted by hostile accusations that they were being badgered and harassed. Occasionally, the officers were permitted inside, despite being reprimanded and informed they should be searching for Paislee. In the past 2.5 years, this has occurred around a dozen times. However, Cooper, Shultis Jr., and his live-in father consistently restricted access to the basement and bedrooms, and without a warrant, the authorities were unable to conduct a more thorough search. The fact that this kept going for 2 years worried us, Sinagra added. For a period of 2 years, they misled us, with the father claiming not to know about his daughter's whereabouts. Only a few days before, the cops received another tip which changed everything. They had previously been hearing only allegations and were not able to take any action without a promising lead. This source of the fresh tip is not specified, but it included tangible proof that the girl was hiding somewhere within the residence. Now that they had enough details, the Saugerties Police Department could finally get a warrant for search. On Monday, at 4 p.m., officers showed up to make sure nobody had left the premises. At 8 p.m., they carried out the search, resulting in unexpected findings. Following their search, officers came across a room in the basement for the first time. It had Paislee's name written on one of the walls and a bed that looked like somebody had recently slept on. The homeowners insisted they only had her room prepared in case she was ever located, and denied knowing where she was. "Is she here?" we inquired, and they denied that anyone was staying in that specific room of their home, as reported by Sinagra. They claimed that they had set the room up like that in the hopes Paislee was to come back. Around 9 o'clock at night, Detective Eric Thiele shined his flashlight into a crack in the wooden staircase and noticed what appeared to be a blanket. As Thiele and his associates took apart the stairs, they spotted 2 little feet. They then took Paislee out. She had spent more than an hour lying beside Cooper in the compartment, without making a noise. The toddler and her kidnapper were both found inside when a few more steps were removed, according to the authorities. It was somewhat of a confined space, damp and cold. There, the youngster along with her kidnapper, Kimberly Cooper, were discovered hiding. With a door in Paislee's basement bedroom, heading to a brief passage leading to the confinement, it seemed very probable that this improvised hiding place was used each time the officials paid Shultis Jr., his father, and Cooper a visit, Sinagra stated. Police subsequently took the three adults in question into custody. Cooper is charged with second-degree custodial misconduct and compromising the safety of a child. Although Shultis Jr. and his father faced similar charges, their interference during custody was categorized as a first-degree felony. It was mandated that none of the three engage with Paislee. The girl was handed back to her legal guardians, safe and with good health. Luckily for her, on the way back to the police station, those who rescued her made a stop at McDonald's. According to the police, the investigation is still in progress, and further arrests are still pending. After hearing of her husband's absence at the office on November 29, 2011, Linda Kolman set out to find him. She went to the Kingston, New York gym where Tom Kolman had his early-day workouts. In the rear parking lot, his dead body was discovered by Linda, leaned back over the driver's seat of his sedan. His trousers hung loose, and the seat was nearly all the way back. Kingston Planet Fitness parking lot in Ulster County, New York, became a crime scene. The investigator stated that nothing in the automobile suggested that he had been attacked. Neither was there any indication of physical harm. Lieutenant Kyle Berardi and Associate Detective Brian Reevey were both interested in the whereabouts of the automobile. It wasn't parked close to any building. Detective Reevey remarked, "That was an odd thing. You will park by the gym if you plan to work out in the morning." Lieutenant Berardi went on, "I think we were curious. The entire case was weird." Tom's ex-wife, Michelle Coleman Weber, was shocked to learn that her husband, who appeared to be in good health, had unexpectedly passed away 1,800 miles away in Colorado. She said, "I couldn't process that Tom's dead. The thought of it being anything other than health-related never occurred to me." Tom and Michelle stayed close even after their 12-year divorce. They had 2 children at the time, Bradley, age 17, and Jillian, 15. She had to inform the children of their father's passing. "I wasn't sure how I was going to say it, so I simply figured, just get it over with," said Coleman Weber. After almost 4 years, in October 2015, Gilberto Nunez, a dentist, was taken into custody by law enforcement and charged with both second-degree murder and forgery for allegedly having forged documents from the Central Intelligence Agency. Investigators had gathered circumstantial evidence indicating Nunez used a lethal dosage of the sedative midazolam to kill Tom, who had sleep apnea. Likewise, investigators concluded that Nunez had an incriminating reason for wanting to murder his then-best friend. Nunez, who was going through a divorce from his wife, had been carrying out an affair with Linda for almost a year and needed Tom Kolman to get out of his way. Locals of Kingston, a suburb located 90 miles north of New York City, were outraged by the murder, which was even featured on the national TV. During Nunez's trial in 2016, Linda testified about her 11-month affair with the dentist and his shady attempts to expose their relationship to Tom. Nani had to sit through almost 2 weeks of testimony. According to Linda's testimony, the children of the Nunez and Coleman families attended school and karate classes together, which led to the 3 of them becoming acquaintances. She described how, after starting her relationship with Nunez, she began getting text messages from a woman alleging to be sleeping with Tom during the early 2011. According to what Linda stated in court, Nunez had informed her he was in the CIA, so she requested him to assist her in determining the authenticity of the texts. Linda testified before the jury that the dentist gave her a letter purportedly written by one of his colleagues at the agency. The letter supposedly verified Tom's extramarital affair while also advising her to forgive her spouse, which was odd. As per Linda's testimony, Tom found out about his wife's affair with his best friend in July 2011, yet the love triangle remained. She added that Tom and Nunez grew even closer, and that at one time her husband told her that Nunez was the best pal he has ever met. Nunez was using a burner phone, which investigators discovered during the case's investigation, to send text messages to Tom and Linda, accusing them both of being unfaithful to one another. Nunez confessed to sending the texts and also took full responsibility for fabricating the CIA letter. Prosecutor Mary Ellen Albanese presented her argument during the court proceedings, stating that Nunez had grown so infatuated with Linda that he devised a complex plan to end her marriage. The scheme involved sending the fictitious CIA document, the text messages from a fake lover, and an email in which Nunez purported to be his very own mother, and urged Linda to stop seeing Tom. Once his attempts were unsuccessful, Nunez planned to murder Tom, Albanese stated. Physical evidence was turned over by Albanese, including what seemed to be Nunez's SUV pulling into and out of the gym parking lot at the same time when Tom was there, a web search for midazolam on the dentist's computer, and a couple of unopened vials of the medicine found within an emergency box in his office. In addition, Tom's body had been dug up twice by law enforcement, and upon second exhumation, they identified midazolam's traces in one of his eyes. According to Nani, the theory that was eventually put forward was that Nunez mixed midazolam into Tom Kolman's coffee, then reclined his best pal's back in the vehicle's seat and raised his head upwards to make it difficult for him to breathe. It was obvious they were struggling to present their case. Requests for clarification from Albanese were not answered. One of Nunez's criminal defense lawyers, Evan Lipton, claims the prosecution's case against his client was not credible. Our claim before the jury was not just that Nunez hadn't murdered Kolman, but that there was no homicide in the first place. He died of a natural cause. According to Lipton, the defense team brought their own licensed and board-certified pathologist, who attested that Tom Kolman's heart was on the verge of failing, which was a more plausible explanation of his demise. A pharmacologist, who was a witness for the defense, asserted that Tom couldn't have died from the dose of midazolam that the prosecution claimed Nunez had given him. Leads indicating Kolman might have been meeting up with strangers were not followed up on by them. Lipton says, alluding to the subsequent emails Tom received from a hookup website, Bonacci.com, "We leveraged this information to undermine their claim that Gil is the only other person who could have been in the parking lot that night." On June 17, 2016, the jury cleared Nunez for the murder of Tom Kolman, however charged him of fraud relating to the fabricated CIA records. According to Nani, the defense's medical evidence suggesting Tom Kolman had an enlarged heart clouded the picture of his cause of death. Additionally, Nunez's presence at the scene turned out to be challenging for the prosecution to establish. There was still a reasonable amount of skepticism. Regarding the accusations of falsification, Nani, who was now a reporter for Bloomberg, pointed out that there was no doubt that the CIA documents were fabricated. Nunez's dental office's servers were managed by an IT technician, whom the prosecution had summoned. According to Nani, he testified that Nunez asked him to play along as a CIA operative. In the months before Tom's murder, Nunez offered $500 to two individuals to pose as CIA operatives and had them confront Tom Kolman and Linda. Nunez stood for 2 additional trials on unrelated offenses of insurance fraud and perjury. Within the same year, he overcame the murder charge. In both of those cases, he was declared guilty. On February 2017, Nunez received a sentence of 2 1/3 to 7 years in state prison by Ulster County Court Judge Donald Williams. Following his release, Nunez requested to reclaim his dentistry license, but Williams declined. Nunez was chastised by the judge throughout the sentencing hearing, characterizing him as someone who was consumed by an extramarital affair and would stop at nothing to further his voyeuristic desires. Following a 19-month incarceration at Altona Correctional Facility in New York with a clean disciplinary record, Nunez was discharged in 2018. Nunez is currently on parole until October 2, 2023. Lipton said that he is still in contact with Nunez, whose dental license was revoked by the New York State Review Board. However, he would not discuss Nunez's current job or his activities during the previous 5 years. Nunez had a second marriage with Yamail, a Kingston area's real estate salesperson, in 2014. If you find this video compelling, show your support by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and ringing that notification bell. By doing so, you'll stay updated about the latest investigations and mysteries. Your support means the world to us as we continue to pursue the truth in the world of unsolved cases.